You're probably wondering, what is the greatest hookup story ever? I mean, I'm sure there's some greater than this one, but this one's solid. It's my own hookup because we're kind of close to my hookup anniversary, which my wife is criticized as not being a thing. But if there's no hookup anniversary, there's no anniversary. I mean, there's no kids, there's no house together. Hookup anniversaries are some match that lights this whole thing, baby. Our hookup anniversary was in April of 1997, April 27th, 1997. And, but to get there, I'm a slow mover. And I got issues. I don't know, confidence, whatever. But it all began completely inconspicuously in a world where Jared did not know Sarah and Sarah did not know Jared. That was probably how it ended up working out because she just didn't know me that well. Took time. But by the time you do know someone, it's like 10 years deep in a marriage and gotta sharing the rent. But anyway, so that's not the case. But it was May of 1994, and there's no better month in the world than the month of May in Durango. It's green still. The tourists haven't showed up. It's warm. It's optimistic. People are shedding their North Face everything, getting on their bikes, pedaling around, drunk, sober. Things are happening. And my buddy and I, we were both kind of running at the end of our current living situation. So we're driving together in his Ford Bronco 2 down East 3rd Avenue in Durango. And we see a woman pounding a for rent sign into the front lawn of a massive house, 1237 East 3rd Avenue, big mansion. Is actually built by the last territorial president of Colorado, and at one point would be the home to the dude who wrote the Flintstones theme song. So this house had this glamorous history, although that glamour was long gone, covered in dust, worn away by the time we would meet a woman named Robin on the front lawn of this home and say, we'll rent it. And she was too quick to agree. Sometimes if you go in to get a job and you're hired, and that's when you have to oh God, okay, what for what? But she was like, okay, move on in. We wrote her a check for $310 to rent out the attic for the first month. There's enough room for Todd and me to live up there. And she pulled the sign out of the ground, and boom, there we were. We were roommates at the top of this mansion with a carriage house. I think there's 4 kitchens. I don't know how many bathrooms. There's people living in every nook and cranny of the home. Now, at this point, Sarah doesn't even live in Durango. I'm not even sure if she has. I think by then she knows she's going to go to Durango. Growing up in Baltimore, she's in her senior year of high school. And I'm going into my, I guess, junior year that year, a rising junior, as they would say, which is a very generous statement for a drunk kid. But so we move in our stuff, and Todd, he's working on his documentary, I think in Guatemala, this big story, and so he's gone a lot, and I'm in the attic, and I'm in the bathtub one morning. And it's this big Victorian bathtub, and you kind of have to hunch over because it's the attic, and you're fighting with space with the ceilings. The ceiling's I gotta lean like this, sorry. And I'm in this tub, and it's there's not a lot of warm water. The honeymoon phase is already worn off on our mansion experience. And baths are just you grow up, wake up as an adult, and you're sitting in there in your own broth. You're like, what has happened? So anyway, I'm in the bathtub. And at this point, you're like, is there Sarah yet? Or no. Okay. Greatest hookup anniversary story ever. Okay, we got to build. And this is not just dramatic building. This is real building. This is the infrastructure that leads to the whole thing. I'm in the bathtub, and I hear this humming. Well, that's kind of weird and a little terrifying because I'm in this old home, and no one else is supposed to be in the attic, but there's someone in the kitchen singing. So I dab myself off, wrap this towel around me that I had since I was like a 6-year-old, and I go outside into the kitchen, and there's Robin, and she's singing, and she's naked, voluptuously naked, and just a woman, and I'm like, whoa, Robin, is this part of the rent? I mean, I didn't, and she tells me something to the effect of, everything's all right. They're all going to be here. And I'm already kind of neck hair's raising, a little creeped out because I'm sitting in an ancient bathtub and I hear singing, and then there's a naked woman, and now there's going to be people or something. And I'm like, Robin, let me get you something. So I get her, I think Todd's robe, and thank you, Todd. And I wrap it around her and I take her downstairs. And I just threw on some like sweatpants or something. And we get down there and I'm like, is everything going to be all right? Because that seemed a little weird. And she's like, I'm fine. They're going to be here and help. I'm like, I'm not sure who that they are. It's creeping me. And I said, was there someone I can call? And she gave me the number of a guy, maybe your ex-husband or something. I don't know exactly who this was. But I call him, and he's like, "Oh, she'll be all right. We got, I'll visit. There's some medication stuff." I'm like, okay. And I go to work, and I get a call from this. Maybe it was the same person from Farmington, but somebody, maybe it was the ex-husband. I don't know. There was some relative from Farmington, and this guy says to me, he says, "Listen, my mom's in some." I say mom, like, I don't know if it was her son. I don't know who it was, but Robin's going to need some assistance, so she's going to be away for a bit. Can you kind of watch over the place? I was like, awesome. And immediately in my brain, I'm like, we're going to party like it's 1929. Like, shit's about to crash. And I'm pretty respectful too at the same time. Like, but already they're throwing parties there, and the parties didn't seem like clean and fun. There's a little dirtiness, which leads me to the second favor he asked me, not just watch over the house, but he was like, there's Robin's boyfriend, who was this guy whose name I shan't mention, the Voldemort of my collegiate years, a very frightening man. Looked a little like that Danny Trejo guy that, kind of the dude with the machete, and he's cool and stuff. But this guy was not the cool version of the machete guy. And anyway, he might have been running a teenage prostitution thing out of the house because there was a lot of teenage girls there. And anyway, it was suggested to me in this call that I perhaps help find some place for them to go. So I was like, all right, I'm cool with that, because I wanted to throw parties, but I also didn't want like a 13-year-old girl at the party, and I didn't want to be associated with the Voldemort of my college years and his doings. So my buddy and me, and you're like, is Sarah here yet? I'm really tired. No, it's coming, okay? So my buddy and me, I approach a couple of these girls, and I'm like, you got to go somewhere else. And one of their boyfriends immediately was like, if you call the county, and I didn't even know what the county meant. Like, is that in the Yellow Pages county? And he's, I'll kill you. I'm like, listen, let's do something better than death. How about I find somewhere else for you to live so nobody gets in trouble, So my buddy Jason and me, we loaded a couple of these kids up, and we drove them around until we found their houses, mostly in the Cortez area. And I got to say, I remember one of the houses, we dropped one of the girls off, and I was like, oh, maybe she's better off being prostituted in the basement of a Victorian mansion. And you're like, you're an asshole for saying that. I'm like, oh, you didn't see where she lived. Okay. And there's probably a reason why anyway, stories, man. There's depth. You got to have empathy. Anyway, so drop them off. We get back to the house. I'm a little shaken from the whole experience. Like, whoa, how? You have that out-of-body experience. You're like, I have no idea how I ended up at this place in my life, but here we are. And I'm like, well, let's party. I mean, it's on like Donkey Kong, and I think the Voldemort boyfriend guy was kind of out of the picture. He was just violent and crazy. Robin was taking a break. And then it was just all like the cool people in the house, all these like really friendly people, hitchhikers, random people just showing up, living in whatever, the basement of the basement or the attic of the attic, and like this weight had been lifted from what we would eventually call the crazy house. And we were just throwing amazing parties. And before one of these parties, my buddy Colin and me are getting fueled up at Taco Bell, because tacos at this time were like 49 cents. Remember that? There was like 39-cent tacos, 49-cent tacos. Well, you could buy a lot of tacos on a college budget. And I'm like mid-taco bite, and I look up, and in walks this young woman. And she's beautiful, like this simple elegance. She's like wearing jeans, got a ponytail, she's probably just moving into her dorm all day, whatever. But I'm taken. And I feel something. I look at Colin, and I'm like, I feel something. And he's like mid-taco, and he's like, what? I'm like, this. And he turns and looks, and he's like, yeah, she's cute. And I'm like, no, there's something. And he's like, all right, talk to her. Do your thing. See, here's my thing, and this is what I could do. I could talk to anyone. I could talk to women, and I could talk to men. And men like me because I could talk to women, so I knew women. But men really actually hung out with me because I could talk to women, but I didn't know how to close a deal with women. So that at least they would be around women with whom the deal had not been closed so they could do it, and I could, try to go to sleep with the surrounding bedrooms filled with the noises of coitus, because I didn't know how to, of course, get to that point. I mean, occasionally, yeah, but not all the time. So anyway, I'm like, this is it. This is going to be worth all the things. I'm pouring myself into this. I could feel like my ancestors 100,000 years ago and their giant foreheads lean into the camera lens of my brain and nod over a flickering fire from a cave. They were like, yes. And then I get sucked back to the present, and I'm still in Taco Bell in Durango. And I go up to her. I'm like, by now I got confidence because I got this house. We could throw it. People always are looking for it. You go to college, you want to find a party. Finding a party or knowing somebody that is throwing a party is like, that's major capital. That's like cigarettes in prison. Like, that's huge for people. So I go up and I'm like, I'm the guy throwing the party, and I'd love for you to come to the party. And she's with her like RA or RD, resident director or something or other. She's like pretty solid citizen. So she's going out to dinner with like one of the villain of any dormitory. And, the person that's overseeing the thing. And she's like, yeah, I'd love to. Can I bring some friends? Well, I'm like, God, if a woman says that, that's like the wind chimes of greatness. And I'm like, sweet, boom. So she would come to this party. And I wouldn't be able to, close the deal, of course. And years would pass. Years would pass. And we would be at the crazy house for a few more parties. And then, as all great times do, that kind of went away. There was this one party we threw, and all these football recruits showed up, and one of them ate my shark. I had this shark in the fish tank. And then this one guy named Arkansas Joe, who lived in the basement, who was like he was this former football star, just super stud, threatened to kill everybody, who ate my fish. And then it's like, it was like that party, it peaked there. And then everything it was winter of 95. And the glory days of summer, fall 94 faded as we all moved to different places. And I still hadn't made my move. 95, 96, 97, still had not made my move. And that whole time, like we're like hooking up, we're like, I joke it's like an adult square dance. Like I'd be with her friend, she'd be with my friend, she just really won, and I was like a mini. I mean, like dancing. And I just couldn't do it. Like, I have this problem. Like, if I like a thing or a person, I put it on a pedestal, and I don't know how to act, So, and she knew that. I remember I went up to her dorm, like shortly after that first party, and I want to ask her out. Like, that's why I'm there. That my ancestors are nodding again over the flickering fire, like, done well. And I'm standing there, and I'm in a dorm room, which is like 8 square feet, and there's like nowhere to go but us. And I'm looking at a bulletin board, and I can't. She's like right there, and I'm looking at her bulletin board. I'm like I'm on the spectrum. There's no lie in there, right? I've got something going on, and I'm looking at this bulletin board. And I can't talk to her directly, and there's all these inspirational sayings as young college women often have on their bulletin boards. And there's this picture of Kermit the Frog, and he's like, I don't know, he's just being Kermit the Frog as he is, and this like simple puppet of such depth. And there's a quote next to him like, life is but an insurmountable mountain or something. And I'm like, come on, Kermit, pull me through with your inspiration. And I turn to her and I say, I want to ask you out. And she says, just cold, ice cold. And this is her being selective. These are her cave people looking to her and say, he's got to be stronger than this. And I turn to her and I throw out a lifeline. I say, I'm trying to ask you out. And she says, oh, but you can't. You're trying to, but you can't. My cave people were like, and were immediately stomped by a herd of mammoth. And I left. I mean, she was in the right there. She doesn't need some guy prattling on about how he's going to do it. She needs someone to do it, right? And so time would pass. Finally, in 1997, I was out of school. And a lot of that veneer, that fades quickly, that school veneer. I mean, when you're filling out a resume and they ask you if you're unemployed or student is the greatest euphemism for unemployed. But I had no longer had that facade. I wasn't unemployed either. I was very, very employed. Employed in the most ridiculous lifestyle ever. A dream job for a 21-year-old. Morning guy in a classic rock station in Farmington, New Mexico. An hour drive from Durango, but but culturally, like just years away, just a different place. Oil town, Durango's tourist, North Face, mountain bike, yoga. Farmington, like their yoga is like when like a roughneck gets drunk and puts a young Native American into some kind of wrestling hold because he's a racist idiot. I would see this all the time when I was at events and stuff. Oh God. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for the professionalism. I wasn't ready to be hated as much as I was on the radio. I mean, hated. And this is a dark time. And I was hated because I was on a classic rock radio station. I was 21. I sounded young. I'd replaced like the voice of the Four Corners because he wanted to move on doing something else. So everybody couldn't stand at the fucking, like Walter Cronkite of classic rock and left. And here I come in and I sound like the Noid from the Domino's pizza commercials. And things are going terribly. And as a matter of fact, it gets around that I'm gay. Because one time I said I liked John Elway so much I'd give him a tongue bath. Well, everybody was wanting to get rid of me anyway. So they went after me. And like the owner of the radio station would get these voicemails. And I would come in the morning and he would send these voicemails or whatever, I don't know how, to this woman, Deb, at the front desk. And she would like, you want to hear the voicemails or not? At first I started wanting to hear the voicemails. And then after a while, I was like, please God, don't. I can't hear that. I'm too young. And I mean, I'd never not really been liked. I mean, people may not have liked me, but I wasn't aware of it. I was just, rose-colored glasses. I was Mr. Fun, Mr. Happy, And I remember one time in the middle of the show, my boss comes in. He's like, I got a bunch of fucking voicemails last night. They can't stand you. You got to figure something out. And I was like, oh my God, like I just took this job because I thought it'd be fun and life is terrible. And like my whole body's an ulcer. I'm drinking too much caffeine. I'm partying a lot at night because they're paying me to party to do live broadcast places. They got the young guy. They're just they're not trying to kill me. I'm trying to kill me, and my boss is making me listen to my air checks as I drive home, and I'd listen to my air check and I'd rewind it and listen to it again, and I'm just like freezing up. One time I'd like black out and just drive into a ditch. And my life is so empty. It's becoming more and more empty. Everything I'd ever wanted is happening. I'm partying. There's girls. There's radio. I love radio. I love being able to think of new things every day, but whatever's happened, I'm getting nibbled away by the anxiety. I'm getting just crushed by the lifestyle. I can't handle myself, which is weird that I'm me, but it would be me. It has to like come to me to figure out how we're going to be me. And so it's the spring of 1997. My boss has just come in and said, we really had good numbers. Like, I mean, it wasn't bad as far as ratings went, but the hate was building. Like I was at a Walmart once for a fundraiser. It was for kids during the holidays, right? And the gay thing was really hot. Like, I mean, ironically, this is 97. So we're only a few years away from when Colorado, the supposedly more liberal state, was called the hate state because of Amendment 2 on the ballot to make gay marriage, I guess, I don't know if illegal is not the word, but it wouldn't be recognized. And so I'm just getting thrashed and okay. And just getting thrashed, and I'm at this Walmart, and I'm about to MC this thing, for a charity, and it's gonna be big, and there's corporate sponsors, and there's this woman trying to put up a banner, right? And I'm like, oh, I'll help you put up the banner. So I go up the ladder, and then the lady who was coming down the ladder when I'm going up, she says, don't fall. There's a vacuum below you. I'm like, oh, I don't want to fall on that. And then this woman who could be America's grandmother, she looks like the Where's the Beef lady, just wholesome, big button sweater wearing lady. And she says, oh, from what I understand, he'd love to fall on something like that. And that's when I was like, okay, A, you're a bunch of homophobic assholes, and B, F for fuck's sake. Okay, really? Is this... Whew. So, emptiness is what I'm trying to say. And in that spring, with what looked like everything was nothing, I am doing live broadcasts at bars, which is fantastic, right? On the surface, I'm drinking, I'm hooking up. But there's so much sadness. Like, for one, in a small market, not only am I broadcasting live, but in between breaks, I had to put on this big dog costume because the radio station was Big Dog 96.9 and 106.7, your Durango translator. And it was this big bulldog, and I'd wear this costume, and you'd get inside, and it smelled like just the sadness and lost hope of every DJ who had drifted through the Four Corners. And Okay, hold on. I gotta finish it. I'm gonna finish this story. Okay. The result of hookupiversary. I'll be. Just give me a minute. I'm gonna finish this story. I know. Just hold on. Another result of the hookupiversary. There's a lot of results. Okay, so I just been drinking, I'm driving this vehicle. It wasn't my vehicle, but car dealerships would give me a vehicle to drive around so that I would talk about the dealership and stuff. And apparently this one dealership couldn't sell this one vehicle, so they needed it to be hyped a little bit. And it was a little tiny truck, like a Chevy Love or something. And it was painted like yellow, blue, and pink and had a pink interior. It's this little tiny truck. And that's what I'm driving around. I look like just the saddest clown on the planet with my furry friend, the bulldog costume, sitting right next to me. This giant head, this like frowny dog looking at me. And I'm about to leave Durango and drive to Farmington and stay the night on the studio floor so I can wake up and do the show. And I mean, I had an incredible, I'll tell you about my co-host in a second because the hookupiversary is about to happen, but it takes a community. It takes everybody coming together. And I'm on my way out of town, and Sarah lived on the south end, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ask her out. Like, I've got to go ask her out. This has got to happen. And so I pull up the little truck outside her house and sit there. And I can see me, that same out of body, like after dropping off the young girls, I'm like, wow, this is where I am now. And I'm like, go. So I slam the little truck door, and she lived on the second floor. I run upstairs, all dramatic, 80s rom-com ending, and I run upstairs. I'm going to ask her out. Like, she's, oh, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm here to sweep you off your feet. I didn't say that, but in my head I felt it. And I'm like, I don't know. And there was so much sadness roiling through me. It's like if it was a volcano, but instead of lava, it was tears. And it's about to burst through the magma of my head. And I talked to her for like, I don't know how long, an hour or something. Wonderful conversation. And I leave without asking her out. Kermit the Frog is even disappointed. And that guy could keep a, happy face through a lot. And I'm back in the truck with this smelly, broken dream, big dog head and this tiny truck. And I start it up and then I stop it. And I'm like, no. This has been 3 years now. No. Get up there and do what your cave ancestors told you to do. So I go upstairs and she's on the phone with some dude. Of course, she's, a hottie and stuff. Everybody's ringing her up. And I'm like, this isn't happening. And she's on the phone and she's like, what does this thing? Even though she knows. And that's the thing. Even though I know she knows, it makes it harder. You'd think her knowing would make it easier. But now that she knows, it makes it weirder. So, and pedestals, And so I just grab a yellow pad and I'm like, I write it like a dumb first grader. I'm like, will you go out with me? And she just grabs it and smiles and writes as if magic itself could pen the paper. A quill from another dimension landing like a bird on the darkened shoulder of my young adult life writes, yes. And I just was stoked. I just ran out of the house and got in the vehicle, a new life born, right? But everything starts to change. So, yeah, so I'm stoked. I get, okay. So I get, everything changes. Everything changes because suddenly I have a life I'm talking about. And this is just, if you're going to entertain, if you're going to tell stories, here I was all prior to this on the radio. I'm like just pulling like news and trying to make jokes about it and stuff and getting myself in trouble with my, tongue baths and stuff. But suddenly I have this thing and I'm talking about I don't know what we called it. It was like the girl, the magic girl. I don't know, something, right? And everybody's interested suddenly. Everybody's like tuning in to find out like, oh my God, is this little loser going to figure it out? And my boss even comes in. He's like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you have something you're talking about that's like going to take some heat off me." And I probably helped that we're talking about a girl, and he didn't have to worry about every redneck in Farmington want to murder him for employing a gay person. For God's sakes, this country, it's a drumstick. Don't do that. So I people are calling in. They want to talk about it. And my morning show partner, who's just so good, and Todd is his name, and he's just another Todd. And Todd's helped me much in life. And he's leading me through this conversation of the dating process and like, what are we doing? And I'm still slow. I mean, the first time we'd actually get physical was just holding hands, and like at 4 a.m, after just me sitting up for hours with her, not doing anything, she had to grab my hand and hold it. This is because I put her on a pedestal. Like, I can't reach her, you know? If I don't pedestal you, you're right here, and we're going to get it on, but I can't. So it's fantastic. Numbers are going up. People are like, oh my God, you're not that dirty little man out there hooking up with women at live broadcasts. This is fantastic. And so this would all lead to what would be, the hookupiversary that spring, April 27th, 1997. And there was such an armada of people interested. I remember like our first date, I made like a little vegetable dish, and like the day before I got off the air, I told people like, I'll come back and let you know how it went. And everybody's like waiting to find out about this vegetable dish, which blows my mind. Like all this time, even though I knew how to entertain before radio, I kind of forgot once it became commoditized, I guess. It became a commodity. And then I'm like, Jesus, people want to know about a vegetable dish. Holy shit. I thought they wanted me to talk about, I don't know, Tori Spelling or whoever was in the news in 1997. And craziest thing happens. So I remember Todd met her in Durango, and he comes back on the air the next day. He lived in Farmington, but we're on the air, and he's like, guys, I met her. I met the girl. And here's what I have to say. Why would I get emotional about this? Well, Todd's dead. That's kind of sad. But he said, guys, and Todd's like, he's super popular. He has this whole posse in town, and he's just keeping me afloat the whole time. Everybody wants to kill me. And he's like, if he screws it up with this woman, we all get a chance. Everybody who's listening right now gets a chance to line up and hit him with a snow shovel. And it's funny, a lot of people are calling like, can I just hit him now? But affectionately for once. It wasn't just violent, like road ragey anger. It was like fun anger. And so we're talking about it and stuff. And I go down, I'm ripping and reading. I'm trying to find some news to talk about. It comes off this dot matrix printer. The internet's very new. We had this one internet computer, but it was so slow. And looking for something to talk about. And Todd comes down, the hallway, and he's like, hey, there's some chick on the phone for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. On the phone, like at a radio station, especially a conversational morning show, there's these phones are going off all the time. And he just happened to answer it. And I go in there, and there's this young woman on the phone. And she's like, she goes, are you Jared? I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, that's so crazy. I'm listening to you. And she worked in a kitchen somewhere. I don't know, like maybe a casino or something. And she's like, yeah, I started saying like, I know this guy. Like, I know this voice. I know this, the way he tells these stories and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, well, how do you know me? She's like, I don't know if you remember this, but you dropped me and my friends off because we were getting in trouble in Durango, and you took me down to Cortez. And I was like, oh my God, you're alive. That is so good to hear. Such a tiny footnote, but a nice little bow tie on the nuttiness as the hookupiversary. The crazy house. Those lost and destitute in a crazy house even found a life. And then those like me who had no reason to be lost and destitute, but just guided themselves in that direction out of whatever crazy anxiety riddles this big fat head. So there it was. And just a final note, I would leave right after every morning show. And I remember my boss calling me, and I answered. He's like, where are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm at Sarah's. And he's like, okay. No, he wouldn't have called me at Sarah's because I wouldn't have a cell phone. But he called me. Maybe I was at my home, whatever. And he's like, oh, you're already not at the station. I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I guess you must like her because you used to stay here for hours. And I was like, well, I can. I can stay more. And he's like, no, this is good. This is good.